but that's about the only, distinguished individual we see in that video. But of course, what stands out is just the moment itself, because the minutes leading up to the moment are just, people are just there. It's just these humanoid figures under the tent. You see people walking by. There's not really much of a commotion happening outside of the shove. And even when you watch the moment of the shove, you don't really see too much going on outside of the shove itself. And then all of a sudden you see a bunch of dispersing and scattering because, people are realizing, oh, somebody's been stabbed here. But again, the video had minimal things to take away outside of the moment itself.
Right. And I was surprised because I remember there was one witness near the end where the prosecution was able to kind of point them out and say, like, so this is where you were at that time. And it's like, I don't even know how they were able to do that because I feel like I'm just looking at pixels. You know, like these little, and you understand that there's a ton of people under the tent. You see the colors of Austin Metcalf's school. It's about 7 minutes, 59 seconds in, like the shove happens. I will say you can take away from this kind of the force of the shove, because it seems like, Metcalf, you see him kind of shove, and then there's a reaction from Karmelo, and then we'll talk about like what he does after. But I think that was something. I look at this, and it wasn't, if you were someone who was, on the side of the defense, it feels like it's a shove. I mean, that's what it is. It doesn't seem like it's this aggressive punch or something like that. And how do you remember that playing out in the courtroom, just that particular part and kind of the force and how it was described?
People there wasn't really much of a real reaction to it, because another thing I take away from this, the moment of the video, Chris, is that, the defense was saying, we've heard all through, the social media and the interviews with Karmelo's parents, is that he was like more or less being jumped by a collection of students, 3 to 4 students. The moment in the video doesn't really depict that in any specificity. Of course, again, very pixelated, very, not as quality as we would have liked it to be, but you don't see that at all, because that, to me, that would be a lot more commotion going on. But as far as in the courtroom, the video is shown, and it's kind of like you and I watching it here. It wasn't much of a, I was expecting cell phone video. All these teenagers have their phones out, and you're going to see something really graphic, up close and personal, great quality, lots of yelling. And now we have this silent video that looks like it was filmed at a Quick Trip. So it was like people saw the moment, but there was no shocking, no gasp. It was just, oh, here it is. And, the prosecution even prefaced before they played it, like 2 minutes before they played it, hey, you're not going to be able to see much here. This is why we have this forensic video analyst to kind of talk to us about how he identified who, and the other different angles of coming in the gates. And we saw Karmelo in a lighter colored hoodie and Austin in these colored shoes. Like, he walked through all that before you got to the moment, because if there was none of that, you wouldn't know who you were looking at, right? I mean, you could probably make an assumption based after the moment who's running away and whatever else, but everything leading up to that, you wouldn't know anything.
No, and even looking at the shove now, as you're talking, I'm kind of like just on the final, like, kind of 5 seconds leading up to it, and then you see it, and it's like there's not really, from who I can see as Austin Metcalf, it's like there's not a lot of separation between the two. It's not like a shove where Karmelo almost like falls backwards even. Yeah. And it's like if Austin came out, like it literally is like they're not separated at all. It seems like he had him the entire time. I do think, and there were some questions, I think Carmelo Anthony's parents brought it up, where it's like there's so much, it seems like some of the testimony perhaps varied when it comes to how strong the shove was, this and that. And like you do take away where it's like this was almost a year ago, more than a year ago, that all of this happened. And it's so bang, bang, where it's like to remember that moment over and over and over again. I mean, especially when there's not a lot of video, which is surprising because you would think, since they were alleged to kind of have been going back and forth, nobody took out a camera phone, which seems to happen a lot. I was surprised, like, just how quickly it happened, and then the force itself. We do see, as the video continues on, you can see Karmelo Anthony. He leaves the tent. He goes up the bleachers. And then I'm just playing it here, and he's kind of like running down the bleachers a little bit. You see someone kind of going after him and then running back to the tent. And then Karmelo runs his way from the bleachers, where eventually it seems like he comes in contact with an adult, with a few people who are following him. How do you remember that part of the story being told, and what we're looking at as we see him in this spot shadow kind of running from the bleachers out of the area where all of this took place?
So, you have the perspective of the prosecutor you have the perspective of the defense attorney, then you have the perspective of the students who were there. So prosecutor is obviously saying he's done this heinous thing. He's conscious of what he's done, guilty. He's running away, trying to get away and be anywhere but there because, he's running and then he stops and he walks a little bit. So they were trying to go along with, he's just trying to blend in like nothing happened. That's where the prosecution was going. The witnesses, the student witnesses were kind of echoing the same thing, but some of them testified to how you mentioned someone was running after him and they turned back around, but then you see 2 or 3 more going after him, continuing not to go after him. You don't see them, get in a physical altercation. More so you see them pointing out like, that's him. And that's what they were saying on the stand. Yeah. And then the defense is saying, he ran away. He was scared of what he'd just done. But their whole, key point of the whole situation is that he had opportunity to run out of the stadium and really run away. But he stayed in the stadium. He ran to the track, found an adult and stayed there. So trying to paint, his character as like, he realized what he'd done, but not in like a malicious way, if I should say. But the thing about it, like when you point out that moment where he runs to an adult, that coach took the stand as well as another coach who was in the vicinity because there was this woman, this female coach, and both of these coaches, all these coaches are from different schools. There was this female coach from some different high school. The name of the high school is lost upon me right now. But anyway, she was testifying that, she saw a lot of commotion going on, a lot of yelling over where the tent was, right? And then you see those students running out and they're like, Mrs. So-and-so, it's him. He stabbed somebody. It's him. And she's like, what's going on? And then as they're saying that, Karmelo's walking past or jogging past. And then she looks to the adult, the coach that, finally embraces him and goes to walking with him around the track. She looks at him like, hey, they're saying he stabbed somebody. Don't let him leave. That's when that coach kind of like puts his arm around him, not like in an aggressive way, just like, hey, son, come here. What are they saying you've done? What have you done? And that's when, as we were talking before a few weeks ago, how that coach was like, hey, what have you done? Hey, he put his hands on me. I told him not to. Well, if that kid dies, your life changes here forever today. Karmelo's like, he's not going to die. And the coach is like, okay, but like, if he does. And that's when that coach said he started crying and everything like that. So you had those 3 different narratives from prosecutor, the student witnesses, and the defense attorney inside that courtroom, all kind of echoing the same action, but different sentiments, like as to reasonings as to why he was running.
Yeah, and it's like 1 minute after the stabbing takes place, it's like he's at the exit to the track, it seems, and then he turns around and then he's talking with someone who I think is the adult, and it seems like people are just starting to understand like what happened over on the bleachers, but then he's like walking by himself and then you see another coach come up. So it is something where, and that's what made this case, I think, really difficult for the defense and to an extent the prosecution as well, is like we just don't have anything up close other than the aftermath. And we'll talk about the body cam video and what that shows here in a moment. Going through these images, because again, I hadn't seen them until they were released. You had seen them before, and we had talked about Eddie, who is this teammate of Austin Metcalf, was at the time when the state was questioning him, strong prosecution witness, someone who was very close with Austin Metcalf. And if I remember correctly, he kind of backed off saying that he knew Karmelo Anthony at all. And like some points for the defense, if you want to say that, was that they were arguing that he was invited into the tent, Karmelo Anthony, because Eddie waved him over. And to prove that they had some sort of relationship, the defense presented these pictures of Eddie and Karmelo. And I was not anticipating them to look as friendly as they do in these images, where it does raise some questions as to why he wasn't more straightforward, it seems, in that moment, that he knew Karmelo Anthony through his girlfriend and they had hung out before. I mean, there's a picture here of them playing Guitar Hero together, which was not something that I was anticipating just based off what he had told the jury when the state was questioning him.
Yeah, and that was a huge moment for the defense, because now it's a credibility issue, right? He's on there, we heard about Eddie in the opening statements from the defense. He was under there to see his friend Eddie. So everyone's awaiting this Eddie Parra kid there. Who's this? Why, what does he have to say? And, of course, the question is, if this is your boy, if this is your friend, he's getting into an altercation under the tent. Why aren't you standing up and, hey, everyone chill. It's my guy. Like, we'll get out of here, whatever. So that was a question, just circulating in my mind. So he gets up there and he's testifying for the state, which was already interesting enough to me because the defense made a big deal about him. I expected him to be a defense witness, and then the state calls him. And then he pretty much gets up there and says, like, yeah, I knew Karmelo, but we weren't close. I wouldn't say we were great friends. Going along with his state's testimony. then the pictures you're talking about, the defense is like, oh, not good friends. Here's 10 pictures that pretty much show otherwise. You know, the Guitar Hero picture, the picture where they're making goofy faces. They're at Eddie's house for Eddie's like grandmother's birthday. All this different stuff. So it's like, we're not trying to assume anything, but is Eddie lying? You know, again, the credibility issue. But the thing about it is, Chris, if Eddie's credibility is not good, does that affect the actual moment of what happened? Okay, Eddie, maybe, let's just theoretically, Eddie's not telling the truth. He's just saying whatever he wants to say. Does that have a direct correlation to what happened with the stabbing? And that, I mean, I guess that was for the jury to decide, and clearly they didn't think so, you know, one way or the other. I mean, they sent him away for 35 years. But that was still a big issue there when the defense said, hey, we have the receipts. I don't know what you're talking about up here, but you grew up with this girl. She's dating this guy. Here's pictures of you guys together. There's other witness testimonies, states witnesses that say y'all were, you know, not like buddy, but like, yeah, he went over to Eddie and, you know, they kept saying dapped him up, which is like, you know, a good handshake between the boys. Yeah. So you had testimony about you sitting next to Eddie, and one kid said he switched seats with Eddie and all that stuff. So it was a very confusing time with Eddie's time on the stand, because you heard all these differing things, and then the challenge by the defense there. So it was like, what's Eddie saying? What's the truth here?
100%, because I think when you look at these pictures, you're like, these people would be not just like friendly, but it seems like they hung out, like the girlfriend's not even in these pictures, and like they're hanging out. You do wonder, and apparently for the jury, they felt this way. It's like, okay, so even if he was invited under the tent, whether he shouldn't have been in the tent or should have been in the tent, like the jury apparently didn't really think that really mattered, where the defense seemed to argue like, look, Karmelo Anthony was invited into this tent, whether or not like track culture or anything like that matters. And then the defense would argue he was the victim. Austin provoked it. Austin shouldn't have put his hands on Karmelo Anthony and all of this. Of course.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is important. The shooter who murdered my sweet little Daniel brought a highly lethal weapon with him to my son's first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary. In approximately 4 minutes, he shot 154 bullets, killing 20 children and 6 educators. Now, Congress is working on solutions to prevent school shootings, the kind of legislation that might have saved my sweet son Daniel from being murdered. We need your voice with us to help us ramp up the pressure on Congress and keep kids safe in their classrooms. Please sign our petition right now and demand Congress finally take action to prevent school shootings.
Yes. Okay.
All right, team, listen up. I've changed my mind.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm gonna add the truffle butter filet mignon.
Oh, that's a great decision, boss.
I'll take the miso chicken.
See, that's for me.
I'm gonna do the blackened salmon.
Sweet and sour shrimp for me.
When you respond with force using a knife, that's something where you just wonder, how strong of, this gotcha moment on this witness actually mattered at the end of the day. Speaking of the knife, we have seen it now for the first time. And I'll say, like, this isn't, it's a pocket knife, but it's not like a Swiss Army knife that you would use. I know we talked about like, oh, maybe he likes going camping, and they could argue that. I mean, this is, I'm not a knife owner myself of something like this.
About it, but
right. This is not like a Boy Scout Swiss Army knife that you would have on a keychain back in the day. And I just wonder how much, when this was shown to the jury, does that, because it comes off as an intimidating knife, when you look at it.
And so we didn't see the knife used in the act. We saw an exact replica. Like, so the evidence knife, I guess they have that at wherever they have it at, stored at the police station or wherever. But we saw an exact replica of it, and they were doing demonstrations, and so they saw a picture of the knife used, obviously, and you saw the body cam of the police saying, "Hey, there's still blood and bone fragments on this knife." When they saw it in the bleachers, because there was that rumor around that it was a cleat tool that he stabbed him with, and so that was swiftly debunked inside the courtroom. No, this knife is on body cam. Here it is on pictures with blood still kind of on it. Anyway, when they brought the replica knife up, got brought up during an officer's testimony. And so the prosecutor and the officer got in front of the jury box, right in front of the jury, feet away. They could reach out and touch them, just showing the knife, how you can, thumb stopper, you can flip it up with one hand if you wanted to, because that was another thing about the speed at which this stabbing happened. Some kids said they turned away, they looked back, and now Austin's on the ground with a hole in his chest. It was just so fast. But one thing that I took away from that testimony from this officer is when they were doing the demonstrations, it kind of, if you weren't listening, you might not have caught it, right? The prosecutor asked them, "Oh yeah, it's heavy duty knife." Yes, sir. "This is the kind you kind of carry when you're on duty." "Oh yeah, we use this for cutting seat belts and things like that." It was just a real quick moment. It wasn't like a real emphasized moment, but I was like, maybe he was asking that to show like, this is a sharp knife. I mean, you know how thick a seatbelt can be when you're cutting people out of car crashes and things like that. And, I'm pretty sure the point was to show like, hey, but, on-duty officers carry knives like this. This might not be the most casual knife. Now, again, clearly you can buy this knife probably in your local Walmart or anything like that. It's not like you have to go on and be, a Marine veteran to get this knife, but
100%.
just showing that it's not, like, to your point, not some little Boy Scout knife, the little red cylinder with a little flip out and maybe have some scissors and a corkscrew in there. This was a real knife here.
Well, and it kind of goes to one of the questions that I think we talked about not really being answered, because it's like, this is not an illegal knife we've learned to have in Texas. It's against school policy, but it's not illegal with the length of which, how long it is for him to have it. But when you look at it, the question that comes to your mind is, why would you bring this to a track meet? And that's still, even if that's not something where like, look, he wasn't charged with any weapons offenses, but it just didn't seem like that was really answered. And like, if just to kind of do if I was in the jury, like when you look at a knife like this, you're like, why would you bring that to a track meet beyond the fact that that question was already being asked in the first place? And the other part too, wasn't it argued that he already had this open in his backpack? What was that? I'm trying to remember. That was
it wasn't, specified because no one really knows. But to the point I was making just a second ago, the speed at which the stab happened, they were pretty much saying, some of these student witnesses and the prosecution, of course, was compounding upon it, was that, the whole touch me and see what happens. His hand's in the bag for, however many seconds it was in the bag before everything went down. They're trying to say that put his hand on the knife, opened it while it was in the bag. So once whatever he felt was going to happen, the knife was ready to go. Right. That wasn't, proven, as a fact. Obviously, the defense was saying, oh, it was just a warning and this and that. But the speed at which people were saying this happened, like in the blink of an eye, they didn't even realize, like even the people who were watching what happened, Austin shoves, whatever happens in 2 seconds, they did not realize Austin was stabbed until he lifted his shirt and blood's everywhere. So that was the whole argument there. Like this knife had to have been opened when it was in the bag. And that was the point of when they were doing the demonstration with the cop, showing, because he's holding the bag with one hand's in the bag, that you could flip it open with one hand, like with ease. You didn't have to take two hands to open it up and then, assume whatever position you're going to assume with it. So that was the whole discussion about that. But again, there was no definitive evidence saying, hey, this knife was opened.
And then just lastly, the body cam video. And we see the video that's been released, the body cam. You have the officer who was the first one to interact with Karmelo Anthony. And then there's another 17-second clip that shows the infamous moment, if you will, that, was definitely shocking to read in police documents when he says, "I'm not alleged, I did it," something along those lines. And you hear him say that for the first time. It was surprising, I don't know, shocking. I mean, you think of the emotional moment, the coach who said, well, if he dies, you're going to change your life forever. And it's like, there's moments where Karmelo Anthony is so calm to the point where he can say, it's not just I'm not alleged. He says, hey, I know how this goes. I'm not alleged. I did it. But then as he get cuffs, there's like this shot of emotion and you hear him in this like kind of weeping voice. But then like within 15 seconds, he's saying his name very calmly to the police. It was just, again, he's probably in shock with kind of realizing what was happening in that moment. But it was just, it's just, I don't know. What was your reaction when you saw that for the first time and just emotionally how he was in those moments?
Yeah, it was kind of a stark dichotomy, Chris, because, he's been painted out to be by the prosecution, this murderer, right? This kid who had a knife here. He intended to do these things. He went over provoking a fight to use this knife. And so when they play this body cam, and we'd heard about the "I'm not alleged, I did it" thing, but when I heard the crying part, you know, when his voice is shaking and he clearly sounds like he's emotional. When I heard that, I was like, oh, you know, maybe there is, you know, this heavy remorse here. He's made the worst mistake you could possibly make on this green earth. But at the same time, it's like it was a weird like sensation, because you've heard all this other stuff, and then it's like, wait, you know, he has a little bit of emotion about it. But to your point again, 15 seconds later, he's like, oh yeah, my name's this. He's spelling his name out. I go to Centennial High School. Everything's fine and whatever. So it was like, of course, people process things differently, right? I mean, you've just stabbed somebody. You, unbeknownst to him at the time, he didn't know it was a death, but you just stabbed somebody at 17 years old. So I imagine the mental gymnastics going on with that. But hearing that crime was I don't know if shocking is the right word, but I didn't expect it. And you know, the court, I'm looking around when hearing that, the jury's kind of looking at each other, and you know, because you hadn't heard anything about that, and the fact that he's sitting there, he was kind of emotionless throughout the entire trial, of course, till the verdict came down. But hearing that emotion, but then, you know, the prosecution harped on, was it, you know, performative in the moment? Because a few seconds later, you know, everything's fine, not fine, but you know, everything's mellow, everything's calm, given the circumstances. So again, just a stark contrast here when you heard that, and then a few seconds later, yeah, I'm not alleged I did it. You know, everything's cool. This is my age. I go to this school. Blah blah blah. Just a weird difference there.
It is, yeah. That's a good way to describe it, because it was just, you know, as you watch all this, you're also realizing like this is Austin Metcalf's final moments, and this is Karmelo Anthony as a free person. And I know he was out on bond, but now 35 years. If he serves the full sentence, he'll be out in his mid-50s. And just to kind of see all of it now and put it together, it's just, you know, it was a lot to take in. Cody Thomas from Court TV, great job covering this trial. Thank you as always for joining us. We appreciate it.
And as always, I appreciate you for having me, man. Happy to do it.
Karmelo Anthony has filed a notice that he plans to appeal his murder conviction. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.
If you don't want to die from neuropathy, now is the time to stop taking gabapentin. If you suffer from neuropathy, I'm going to teach you the exact 1 5-second ritual that has kept my people free from neuropathy for decades. If you've never tried this, you might be ignoring one of the most powerful natural tools in existence to regain sensitivity. That's because this anti-neuropathy blend can coat the nerves and drastically reduce burning in the hands and feet in less than 24 hours. After you start using it, you'll never have to worry about sudden nerve pain again. As a Japanese man working in a research center in Japan, I saw many scientists and researchers unable to believe what they were witnessing. Elders in their 60s, 80s, and even 90s who never needed to take gabapentin. I remember treating only 2 patients suffering from neuropathy, and they weren't even Japanese, but American tourists. Meanwhile, here in the United States, 37 million people suffer from this terrible condition, and every 4 minutes, someone loses a limb. Before returning to the US, one of the most experienced doctors called me in to talk and showed me the data proving that Japan has one of the lowest rates of neuropathy in the developed world, and asked me what the secret was. I told him that over there, we don't treat this condition with drugstore meds or laboratory-produced medications like Neurontin or Lyrica. Instead, we make this mixture with honey and a handful of turmeric at home religiously to prevent and reverse conditions like neuropathy. If you have honey and turmeric in your kitchen, you already have everything you need to eliminate the burning and get rid of numbness quickly, as long as you prepare this natural remedy the right way. And the best part is that once your nerves come back to life, they stay that way without medications or diets. The truth is that Big Pharma has been trying to hide this for decades. They know that if everyone treated this condition with
80% of our students attend debt-free Columbus State Community College. We're making Central Ohio stronger.
It takes 90 seconds for this NASA engineer engineered AC cool down your room. It's smaller than a toaster, cools any room in 90 seconds, and uses just a fraction of the energy of a regular AC. This incredible
know it's some new footage that it came out, right? Y'all know everybody been all over this, right? Y'all want us to be done, but we can't be done because there's more stuff coming out. There's more questions coming out. So stick and stay. I got Karmelo's brother on the line. We got a little bit, of course, from the other side. We got different questions, different everything. Shout out to Nicole. She was here early. Nicole Holly, what up, babe? I appreciate you.
It wasn't no women. It was just barbarianism. So, that saying was very true back then. The strong prey on the weak. So, if you was a weak dude back then, because they was trying you. It was barbarianism. Guys was actually coming, say, man, get a knife, man, I want you.
Prison Stories 101. We actually have him back in the building. T. Win, how's it going?
Oh, man, it's going great. Thank you for having me.
Man, I appreciate you coming back, man. When I say back in the building, man, when I first started this Prison Stories, your conversation was one of the first ones I had. I was just trying to figure out this channel, see where it goes. And, I would appreciate you for coming in early on. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is first have you reintroduce yourself and tell them how much time you served.
My name is T. Win, and I served 30 years, 7 months in Angola. I went in at the age of 16. I was tried as an adult, and I did 30 years and 7 months.
Oh, man, when someone says 30 years and 7 months, again, I've had a lot of people on this platform to where, they've done 5, 10, some 15, some 20. 30 years of your life. As I want to kind of, go back to the beginning. If you don't mind, again, you've already said this before, but I want to kind of reiterate the story of what happened. What age were you when you went in?
I was 16.
16 years old. Where was this charge caught?
It was caught in Shreveport.
Shreveport, Louisiana. As far as being 16 years old, what year was it as far as your incarceration?
I went in, the charge happened on Christmas night. And I was arrested a few days later. So this was 1989. So I went in 1989, Christmas night. Well, the charge happened Christmas night, but I was like I said, caught. I was captured like 3 days later.
All right, if you don't mind, just kind of catching up to speed, what was the reason what was the crime?
The crime was a murder and attempted murder. Being a kid, not being able to stop myself from committing a crime against a brother named Jeffrey Owens. I have to give reference to Jeffrey because had that night never happened, I wouldn't be sitting here and I wouldn't be on a positive path that I'm on because it took something so detrimental for me to change my life around.
Yeah. As far as the situation with Jeffrey, can you or do you mind speaking on what that situation was, what happened? Mind you, you're 16 years old, so I'm assuming, is he a young man as well, or?
Yes, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff was also young. I think Jeff was we was the same age or he was a year older than me. I think Jeff was like a year or two older than me, but he was a young man. And but Jeffrey had nothing to do with it. Jeffrey was the innocent bystander to the situation. It was a situation between me and another guy. And he survived. And so it was a situation where me and the other guy got into it, and it led to me trying to shoot him and accidentally killing Jeffrey.
Let me ask you, at that age,